I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. And today we're talking about 3 reasons why creativity is not efficient. And we're going to be sharing tips for ways you can lean into those creative moments rather than taking the quick and easy route. All right, let's start with our icebreaker, Haley. All right, our icebreaker today. Have you ever had a dream about sewing or something sewing adjacent? The other night, I dreamt I was taking a yoga class in the middle of a Joann's, laughing, crying emoji. And that's from Hope. That's a great question, Hope. So have you ever had a dream about sewing?
I mean, so many stress dreams about sewing.
Like Project Runway style, you have to finish.
And there's one that comes to mind. So I think I was working on a wedding dress with my friend Rachel. I don't remember exactly, but what we were doing. But for some reason, I had been up 2 nights in a row sewing all night. And so I was like incredibly sleep deprived, like to the point of just like being completely delirious. And I finally went to bed and I like crashed at like 5 p.m., just like a weird time. And I was having this dream that I was sewing a pair of pants for Prince. For Prince.
Oh.
The Prince.
Wow.
The artist formerly known as Prince.
But then he went back to Prince.
Yeah, but then he went back to Prince. So Prince, R.I.P. I had a dream that I was sewing a pair of purple pants.
Of course.
For Prince. And there was something like a pattern or something that wasn't matching, like at the seams. And I was like panicked about it in my dream. And then flashback out of dream to real life. My friend Rachel calls me. I like kind of wake up enough to answer the phone. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, I burst into tears. And I'm like, the purple seams on the Prince pants and it's all messed up. And like, I thought it was real. I was so sleep deprived that I thought that this was a real life problem. And she told me, I will never forget, "Haley, I think that you need to make a list of what's stressing you out and then look at it and decide what's real and what's not real." And I was like, "Yeah, that's a really good idea. Okay, I'll have to call you back." And then I like hang up and I like sit there for a second and I'm like, "Wait, what purple pants? What? Like,
where am I?
What's going on?" Yeah. I think she like ended up coming by my place after that and was like, "Are you okay?
Did you have a psychotic break?"
Yeah, like what's going on? And I was like, "Oh, thank you for that suggestion of making a list. It really snapped me out of my like straight up hallucination." So that is like a weird dream / hallucination that I had about purple pants for Prince.
I would call it a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. It was bad.
I mean, what would be worse than disappointing Prince?
Yeah, I know. He was still living. This was a while ago now. So scary.
Well, you know he would notice. He would notice any flaws in his pants.
These purple seams are not matching.
I mean, he cared so much about his appearance.
I'm just like imagining him like slapping me like he slapped Sinead O'Connor.
Oh, no.
I'm like, "Oh, no. Except I would deserve it."
I was just thinking about Sinead O'Connor this morning. Sorry, this is a tangent.
It is.
I was just thinking about that time where she tore up a picture of the Pope because of child abuse in the church and how everybody thought she was crazy back then, like, and how she was vilified in the media.
That was on SNL that she did that, right? Yeah. She was. That was an iconic moment.
Yeah, I mean, no matter how you feel about the whole issue, I mean, obviously nobody is for abuse of children.
Yeah.
Like, obviously. You know what I'm saying. I feel like she was ahead of her time and nobody listened.
Yeah. I was just listening to a cover she did recently.
Her voice.
She has a great voice.
Her voice is amazing.
She's great. Love the hair. Love the shaved head.
Yeah.
Shaved head icon.
Yeah. She's got an incredible voice. Beautiful voice. Anyway, back to the question. I can't really remember, so I don't have a good story like you, Haley. I've had many dreams about sewing that are just your standard run-of-the-mill stress dreams, or just incorporate sewing because I've been doing it all day. I will say that I had a dream about Conan O'Brien last night because I have been watching so many Conan clips on YouTube right before bed. Like, I am kind of obsessed with Conan at the moment. Well, I always am, but particularly right now, I've just been watching a lot of Conan. But that's the only thing. Even though I sewed all day long yesterday,
you were still like,
Conan cancels it out.
Your brain was on Conan.
Yeah, as it often is. All right. Well, thank you, Hope, for that great question. And if you have an icebreaker for us, you can leave it for us. If you're a Seamwork member, just go to seamwork.com/go/icebreakers and you can leave it there. And we love hearing your icebreaker questions. So please, if you can think of anything you would like us to answer, silly like this or not, be sure to leave it for us. All right. Well, today we're talking about creativity and efficiency and the relationship between those two things. So as we all know, time is such a precious, precious commodity for most of us. Well, for all of us, we all have a limited amount of time, that we inadvertently attempt to make everything as efficient as it can be. Well, inadvertently or advertently.
Yeah. Sometimes
know,
on purpose.
So, a lot of times on purpose. And I think that robs us of creative joy sometimes, and just these really important human experiences and, fun in life, when everything has to be as efficient as possible. So, Haley, what's your relationship with efficiency?
It's toxic.
Yeah, me too.
I think that it's reared its head more in this like culture of working from home, because I have less separation between home and personal life. So I don't have that like drive home, that like intentional like moment of pause and reflection where I can get my head into a different space. And so I think that it's like, especially right after I'm done working for the day, is where I find myself kind of spinning my wheels and like flitting from like one task to the next. And I'm like, why am I like treating cooking dinner like a race or like whatever I'm trying to engage in that moment? So I think it's just hard, especially now that we're like, so much of our life for a lot of people, myself included, is at home now. So I think that's kind of where I am with efficiency in this moment.
Yeah. I struggle with it too, a lot. I would say it's one of my top like neuroses is being efficient. And I did not used to be this way. I think for for better or worse, I think there is a book that which is Getting Things Done. When I read Getting Things Done years and years and years ago, it changed my life in both good ways and I think in some not so good ways, because I used to not really be, I didn't have a business at the time. This was like way before. And I used to be kind of a little bit more laissez-faire in things like productivity and stuff like that. It just wasn't something I struggled with. And I think when I read that book, and then when I started a business and had to become a lot more productive and a lot more efficient and had motivation to do that, I became a lot more, I wouldn't say type A because that's not my personality. I'm not type A at all, but I am I prioritize organization and systems and being as productive as possible. And that's really, really benefited me in a lot of ways, but it's also had a lot of negative side effects, which is just what you're talking about, like wanting everything to be efficient all the time. And that combined with a tendency to be an overachiever, I think can be really toxic, because then you're just like, well, what else can I do? I could fit that in. I could do that too. And And that leaves no room for rest.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to prioritize rest. That's my relationship with efficiency.
Do you feel like you're good at setting aside efficiency when you're sewing or doing something creative?
I'm getting better at it, for sure. I really have to work hard at that. I definitely feel like there's a place for it, but you can't live that way all the time. And I feel like with your hobbies, if you incorporate it too much, it's really detrimental and makes you not want to do it. So I feel like there's like a time for it in sewing, for example, or any creative hobby, and there's a time to set it aside. I feel like there's that, like often when people talk about the creative process, the divergent stage and the convergent stage. The divergent stage is coming up with a lot of ideas and being really creative and coming up with different solutions. And the convergent stage is kind of putting it all together and making a plan and doing it. And I feel like you can incorporate efficiency more into that stage than the first one. But if you combine them too much, it can have negative effects. What about you?
It's something that I'm intentionally working on in my life in the moment. Something, especially with I have a lot of creative pursuits, but especially with sewing, I feel like it's something you can get. For me, I get oddly competitive, with myself of oh, I can do that. I can finish or get to that point before lunch or whatever. And I've been doing this thing that's kind of new to me, is that when I sew, sometimes I just sew for 5 minutes. I'm I just feel like I'm just going to sew 2 seams.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to tear myself away after that. I'm maybe I could just do the facing or the whatever is the next step. And it's been kind of this exposure therapy for me of lingering and just taking my time and doing the least.
Yeah.
But I am not very good at setting aside efficiency, but I'm actively trying to be better.
Yeah, me too. I was having this experience yesterday because I was sewing some pants, but I was also making a YouTube video about sewing the pants at the same time. And so I had these very conflicting things going on in my head because I did not want to rush it. I didn't want to, I wanted to enjoy it, enjoy the process, because I do love making videos. But at the same time, the sun was going to go down and I was almost done with the pants, but I had very limited light left. And I started having to flip on, the artificial lights, and that was making me very anxious. So I feel like sometimes my work life and my creative life can be in conflict in that way.
Totally.
Efficiency and creativity. And I also feel like I have this kind of, just this part of me that's I think of as the timekeeper who's always rushing me to go faster and do more. And I feel like that is something I've had to work with and realize that that's just a part of me. It's not my true voice telling me that I need to do this. It's, it's just one of the many internal voices.
Yeah, totally. What kind of sewing projects make you want to linger in the process rather than speed things up?
Ooh, it really depends for me, but I do think the projects that are a little bit more complicated force me to slow down more, because I think with quick and easy projects, I expect to finish them in a day, or an afternoon, or however much time I've set aside. And so if I don't, then I feel disappointed in myself, or I feel like I should have been able to do that, or that, when am I going to have time to finish this now, or, whatever. But I feel like with those projects that you just expect to last a while, or to be a little bit more challenging, or have special details. For example, one of the projects I'm going to be sewing soon is I'm going to make an Ames blouse, which, if you're not familiar with the pattern, it's sort of like this billowy top that we have, very romantic and pretty. And I'm going to add some embroidery onto it. And so hand embroidery is it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
And I know that, and I'm going to make sure I have enough time to do that. So I feel like those kinds of projects actually, they're very healthy for me, because I don't think about them in terms of getting stuff done quite as much. What about you?
I think that anything that involves a lot of pressing forces me to kind of linger because I love pressing, and it's something like I will never skimp on. I will always be like taking my time at the ironing board. So anything that forces me to pause and press more often is something I will just like automatically linger doing.
I think another thing, I don't know about lingering, but I think something that makes me feel the process more than the result is doing anything more improvisational with sewing. That's more just about having fun with fabric. Like we did these blocks for the quilt that we donated recently that were more improvisational, like wonky log cabin.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really done it. I don't do a ton of quilting. I want to do more quilting, but I haven't done a ton of it. And I hadn't done really any improv quilting like that. And it was so fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
And I just really enjoyed the process of it. And I didn't even care. I mean, I wanted to look nice, but I wasn't as focused on having it look perfect.
I definitely hyperfixated on those blocks for like a couple days. I was like, this is so fun. I don't want to stop.
Yeah.
Erica was like, wanted each of us to make like 3 or something. I made 7. I did not want to stop.
It really made me want to do more quilting. And I think, if you're in a creative rut, you could do that with sewing clothes too. Like just make something more free flowing and maybe use a pattern if you don't feel comfortable sewing without a pattern. But I think there's a lot of room for playing around, whether that's, patchwork, using up scraps, whatever it is, and just having fun with it.
Yeah.
Could be like a good amuse-bouche
for
your sewing.
Totally.
All right. So back to this topic. So efficiency can be really stifling when it comes to creativity at times. And I think the pursuit of efficiency can really limit our ability to think differently, think outside the box, and come up with kind of different ideas. So one of the issues is that when you're really outcome focused, so for example, if you're really thinking about how you want to finish this blouse or you expected to finish this particular project in a day, like I was just talking about, it can really rob you of the opportunity to take that scenic route and really explore creativity along the way. So a couple tips if you find yourself in this situation. So if you notice that this is happening to you, one of the things that's really helped me is to set intentions that are more experienced focused and not outcome focused. So what I mean by that is instead of setting a goal of finishing this project by the end of the day or setting a goal to make this blouse this week, instead of really focusing on the outcome, focus on what you're going to feel like while you're making it and what kind of experience you're going to have personally as you make it, how you're going to feel, whether you want to use this time to relax, whether you want to use this time to learn, whether you want to use this time to kind of get into creative flow, whatever that is for you, whatever this experience of sewing does for you at its kind of peak, maybe that could be more of an intention for your sewing session rather than just the end result.
Right.
I think another thing, and this is related, which is, and I've preached this for years and I try to do it as much as I can, but avoid setting arbitrary deadlines for you to finish your sewing project. So in a lot of cases, my deadlines are not necessarily arbitrary when it comes to things like what I was just talking about in making the video. But for most of us, most of the time, and this is true for me most of the time too with my sewing, you don't really actually have a deadline.
Right.
You don't really need to finish this by whatever date or time you set in your head. And I think we can take advantage of that more than we do. Do you do that a lot? Do you set yourself like completely arbitrary deadlines for finishing things?
I tend to like do it with like like where I'm expecting to be with the project, not necessarily like, oh, I want to finish this by the end of the day. I'm more like, I have to set the sleeves before I finish. Like sewing for the day. And I really, really try not to do that. I literally just did that yesterday when we were filming a sew along. but I met my goal and I got like that endorphin boost.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh no, I can't reward the monster inside of my head that wants arbitrary deadlines for everything. I think something that I used to do a lot more was like before I went on a trip or like an event, I'm like, I have to sew something new.
Yeah.
And I don't do that as much anymore because it's just like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
Why do that to yourself?
Yeah.
It's tempting though, especially if you have a reason to sew something. It can be very, I mean, it's motivating. It's fun.
Yeah. I just feel like I'm at a place in my life where I'm like, I have like a toddler to take care of. And like, I have to pack for when we go somewhere, I have to pack for them.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be up the night before sewing and then like get on an airplane with a 3-year-old. That just sounds like my personal version of hell.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I've like matured out of that for the time being. I'm looking forward to regressing on that someday.
Yeah. I think part of it for me is also having a lot of things that I want to make. And so I feel like, well, I got to get through this one because I have so many other ideas. I'm not going to be able to make all these things if I take forever to make this one. You know, and not just clothing. I have a lot of clothing, but I also want to make things for the house. And I was thinking about making some tote bags for the grocery store, for traveling or whatever, and things like that. Or even other hobbies that are outside of sewing.
Yeah.
But that's that part of me that just always wants to do more.
Into making peace with that part of you and like just knowing that you will always have more ideas than you have time. And that's kind of beautiful and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, it is. Like a lot of things in life. Well, the other thing, and I think we've touched on this a bit, is that efficiency, focusing on efficiency too much can also stifle innovation. Because if you're trying to be efficient, you're a lot more likely to default to what's comfortable and what you already know rather than experimenting and trying new and innovative things. And I've definitely found that to be true. Kind of getting back to what I was talking about, the divergent and the convergent parts of creativity. So some tips for that. One thing is to pick out sewing projects that teach you a new skill. So this is a way to be really intentional about it and choose a project that's going to help you learn something new and just expect that you're going to be doing something new, or, you know, kind of staggering them so that you have things that you're more familiar with alongside things that you're not so familiar with. We have a whole episode on niche sewing. We'll link that in the show notes. So if you're looking for something to try that you haven't tried before, that can give you some really good ideas. So if there's something that you've never experimented with before, like, I don't know, even like making shoes or making a hat or just something you haven't tried before, that can give you a lot of great ideas. So I highly recommend. That was a good episode. That was really fun to talk about. Another thing is to take opportunities just to slow down and research when you're doing something new or challenging. I think a lot of times we tend to just jump in. And a lot of us, myself included, feel like we learn best by doing.
Right.
And that's definitely true for me. But sometimes I can tend to jump in a little too fast when I think a part of the joy of sewing is really that research phase where you're really pulling ideas and learning before you actually start using your hands, like seeing all the different ways you could do it, seeing all the different techniques are out there, learning from somebody who's done it before rather than just, you know, attempting it on your own. I think that's another really great way of slowing down.
And I think you can do that too with not just skills that you don't know, but maybe things that you always sew one certain way. Something that we talk about a lot around Seamwork, the staff, is just how there's always so many ways to do one particular technique.
Yeah.
And slowing down to explore those different ways instead of just like taking your tried and true path can be a really great reminder to be present in the moment.
Yeah, that's true. And we're doing some videos on this theme now.
We are.
Haley and I are doing some battles on YouTube coming up for different techniques.
Yes. Where we like showdown on like the way that Sarai makes bias tape versus the way I make bias tape.
My way's better.
But you guys should go watch the YouTube video.
Yeah, you can decide for yourself.
And you can decide that my way is better.
The last thing that I want to, let's kind of area that I want to touch on here is the idea of incubation.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the ways that I think creativity and efficiency collide and counteract each other is that creativity really often requires some period of incubation, and it's not always this immediate one-time event.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need to give your creativity a lot of time and a lot of space so that your ideas can really mature and develop. And this is something I've been thinking about quite a bit because I've been kind of working with this idea of having dedicated time for creative thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really helpful for me. I'm reading this book. I mentioned it in another episode. I don't know if it's going to come up after this or before this, the episode we just recorded, but it was this book called Idea Flow that I'm reading. And one of the techniques that they have in the book is if you have a problem or a question that you don't know the answer to write it down before bed and then sleep on it. Mm-hmm. And then in the morning, come up with a list of different ways you could approach the problem. And that sleep really helps give your brain a chance, gives your subconscious a chance to work on the problem when you're not fully aware of it. And I think this is something that's been shown, in a lot of different ways. I think Thomas Edison used to take naps like midday in order to kind of jumpstart his subconscious. And you hear about this all the time, but I think it really is true that mm-hmm. you need that time to not be thinking directly about the idea and just let it percolate a little bit. Another thing that's really helpful is having some dedicated time to conceptualize and just play with ideas without actually making the thing. So without actually sewing, for example, that can be really, really valuable. In Design Your Wardrobe, for example, we talk about how incubation is really the trick to good design. It's really about giving yourself some room to breathe and think, not just when you're focusing on the problem, but when you're not focusing on the problem as well. And when I say problem, I mean like a design problem, like which could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. So I really like having time to do a one-person brainstorm and then step away from it mm-hmm. and come back later. That's something I've been experimenting with every week now, trying to have that time to just like sit and generate a whole bunch of ideas mm-hmm. and then just leave them alone for a little while. And I think with your work, Haley, too, this is a big aspect, is just like generating a whole bunch of ideas.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you immediately know which one is going to be the best, or do you kind of like let them sit for a while?
Occasionally I know which one is going to be the best, but you don't know that until you only know that in hindsight. Mm-hmm. So that's why I always think it's like really important to approach your flow of ideas with no judgment and allow yourself to spend time with like the good ideas, the bad ideas, the ugly ideas, mm-hmm. Because you never know which one's going to be like the real winner. For example, sometimes when I'm sketching, I'll start sketching something. I'll get halfway through it. I'm like, this is weird. Mm-hmm. What am I drawing? But in those moments, I always like force myself to finish the illustration and just like see where it takes me. Because sometimes it ends up better than I thought it would, or it triggers another idea that ends up being the real winner. So just like allowing that space for your creativity to flow without judgment is so vital.
Yeah. And I think, like you're saying, like generating a lot of ideas is such a helpful part of that. And I think when it comes to like your personal sewing, this could be part of a design process like Design Your Wardrobe, or it could just be your inspiration process, your process of gathering tons and tons of inspiration and then mm-hmm. coming back to it with fresh eyes mm-hmm. later on. I think can be really, really helpful. Another way you can kind of get incubation to work for you is if you're frustrated or if you don't like your finished project, to just step away from it and take a break. And that when you return to it, you might have a different perspective. So it might be, the different perspective could be a way you could, fix an error that mm-hmm. that's driving you crazy. Or it could just be, you might realize it's really not that bad. This thing that really bugged you is not that bad. There have been times definitely where I've made something, like every time I make something, I see what's wrong with it and see how I could have improved it. And sometimes that's really helpful for the next time I make a project, or even if I make that project again. And then other times I look at, photos of it and I think, well, that's not that, it looks great. Like,
yeah.
It's fantastic. So what if it's, it's got this little minor issue? That's something I learned from. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a a helpful way to kind of frame your problems. And it's not necessarily about being perfect and efficient and, spot on all the time, but about learning.
Yeah, totally. You can't let perfection be, what is it? The enemy of good?
Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Something like that. Wow, these are all really good tips that I need to take to heart. I practice some of these, but I definitely could use a little extra practice. I think that my big takeaway is that, first of all, I do better. I've come a long way when it comes to slowing down. I think that my other big takeaway is that I was just thinking about that quilt. I'm like, man, maybe I need to sew another quilt, because that was a very refreshing experience. And I'm also redecorating my bedroom right now, and I really want to make a king size quilt.
Yeah, I do too, but I don't know. Ken's gotten into this thing where he likes to play laser pointer with them in the bedroom at night, and they love it because our bedroom has carpet, so there's a lot of traction. But they're always running across the bed, claws out.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Banned.
I can't
save the quilt.
No, their happiness is paramount.
Oh, you're a big person for that. I'm curious, what was your big takeaway from this episode?
I think my biggest takeaway from this is the idea of incubation. I think is really important, and this idea that if you really are interested in getting the most juice from your creativity, and when I say that, I mean really the most enjoyment from it, and have it be the most as fulfilling as it can be in your life, then you kind of have to let go of the idea that it's of being productive. And I think one of the ways that I could improve that is just consciously building in those periods of incubation a little bit more. And I've been trying to do that more and more, but I think there are a lot of different ways you can incorporate that into your life for whatever your pursuits are, whether it's sewing or any other creative pursuit that you have. And that's something that I want to work on over the next, several months. So
you got it. I believe in you.
Oh, thank you, Haley.
Well, I really want to shout out Design Your Wardrobe really quick. Design Your Wardrobe is a super popular premium course that we have that is free to our Seamwork members, and it walks you through a process of designing a collection of projects for a season. It's available as a self-guided program, or we run it as a group course twice a year. You can learn more about it at seamwork.com/go/DYW. And if you want a little taste of what's included, you can get our free sewing planner at seamwork.com/go/free planner. And we will link both of those things in the show notes. And if you liked this episode, I just encourage you to leave us a review. It makes us aware of whether we're on track or not. I hope we are. I hope we're making things that you like, but it also helps other people to find us so that we can share this podcast with even more people who love sewing just like you do and just like we do. You can leave us a review. You can thumbs up it. You can give us 5 stars, whatever you can find the time for. We would just appreciate it. And you can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork Video. We've been doing a ton of cool new content. Sari's been killing some project diaries that are really fun to watch. You can follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to join Seamwork and become part of our private community, plus get access to hundreds of sewing patterns in dozens of sew-along classes, podcast listeners get 50% off. That is a lifetime discount when you join at seamwork.com/go/podcast50.
All right, that does it for us this week. I'm Sari.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.